I'm Marvelous Harrison, and this is Brant Cooper Smith, the director of AJC's Washington office. Back in 1951, I was hired by AJC as a telephone operator. Now I'm a secretary. Worked my way up and am proud of it. But last year, in 1965, the thing I was most proud of was that I was going to the final day of the March on Montgomery with AJC. Most of the people going didn't know the South, but I knew the South. I was its daughter, born in Columbia, South Carolina. I knew the segregated water fountains, waiting rooms, and schools. The voter registration test questions for whites and the ones for Negroes. A white man went to register and was asked something like this. Mr. Smith, who was the first president? George Washington. Very good. That is correct, Mr. Smith. We gonna register you to vote. Then a Negro comes up. Recite the Sixth Amendment. You can't do that? You don't know that? Can't register you to vote. Once, my father stepped on a bus before a white man. There was no way he could have seen that white man. All of a sudden, something's pressing on the side of his head. The man had pulled a gun. Nigger, you step down off this bus or I'm gonna blow your brains out. So, even though I hadn't stepped foot in Alabama's capital, I knew Montgomery. It did not disappoint. Mr. Cooper Smith had also gone to Alabama. Like me, he had had a time to remember.
I had arrived in Selma 2 days in advance with Reverend Walter Fauntleroy of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. We had flown in from Washington, D.C., where I ran AJC's office. From the moment I hit Selma, I went into overdrive, and that's where I stayed until I departed 7 days later. I was a Selma point man. All schedules for incoming trains and buses were called in to me. People were pouring in nonstop from all over, including AJC chapters from across the country. I also made all arrangements for Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. Heschel was the most famous rabbi to come to Selma, but hardly the only one. Rabbis were always present. They were among those who stood out in the rain day and night in Selma. There were 5 rabbis among a group of demonstrators who were arrested. And as a matter of fact, religious services were held in their cell. One of the rabbis there ordered in 1,000 yarmulkes, which were renamed freedom caps. The adoption of the yarmulke by civil rights workers at that time went back to Birmingham. One of the rabbis there was asked, "Why do you put that yarmulke on your head when you go into a church?" And he answered, "Because you always cover your head in the presence of the Lord." A civil rights worker then responded, "Well, give me one of those, because wherever the movement is, that is where the Lord is."
I had been in all the marches and demonstrations in New York, even going to Washington, D.C. once. But this was special. Reverend King would lead the marches all the way from Selma to the state capitol in Montgomery. It would take 5 days. The route went through Lowndes County, a segregationist stronghold. I tell you, it was frightening, absolutely frightening. People always ask, weren't you excited? But I say it was scary. Everybody looked mad. Even the National Guard, who was there to protect us, looked angry. I don't know, maybe they were from the South. But I tell you, whenever I looked at them, I thought, this way of life will surely be coming to an end. Yes. I think some of them understood that too. And that's why they hated us so.
After I finished in Selma, I went straight up to the Montgomery headquarters. What a surprise that was. Not a single person there, not a one, had any experience in doing PR with an event of this size. So I called all over until I finally was able to recruit a top professional from the AFL CIO. But then I brought in Lenore Kahn, a first-rate PR person from AJC, and that relieved me a bit, having someone there that I knew. Next, I put together their team and then rounded up all the needed equipment. What a hassle that was, to get telephone lines in less than 5 working hours, to find space in a hostile community, even getting limited amounts of paper, typewriters, and mimeograph machines was difficult. No one in Montgomery wanted to have anything to do with us. And those that would, well, it was 100% cash. The Birmingham News described the march as organized chaos, and I think they were right. 2 days later, on the 24th of March, 1965, from about 11 p.m. until 4 a.m., I think it would be safe to say I made every executive decision there was for the March on Montgomery. Walter Fauntleroy had to be with King and his executive group at one of their many, many strategy meetings, which were held for security reasons in unidentified private homes. I now believe I can run an army. It was both trying and satisfying.
I don't know how many miles we marched that day. My feet were sore, so sore. But my spirit was lifted when I heard Dr. King. No matter how difficult the moment, he said, or however frustrating the hour, it will not be long, because truth pressed to earth will rise again. I needed that encouragement to get through the rest of the day. When we tried to go back to the airport, the cabs were just whizzing by. No driver wanted to pick us up. Finally, we got a taxi, but the driver was taking no chances. I had to crouch down on the floor, totally out of view. When we got to the airport, another problem. We had flown down on a small chartered plane, but the airport workers wouldn't roll out the steps to the plane, so we couldn't board and get back home. We waited in that damned airport for hours and hours. Then news began to spread. A civil rights worker had been murdered. Now my nerves really ratcheted up. Around midnight, they brought out the steps to our plane. It had just been plain meanness. That's all. Plain meanness. We landed in New York about 2 in the morning. It had been a day that would always be part of me.
On the final day, I didn't get to see the march until it came downtown, and I didn't hear any of the speeches except as a vague, noisy background to our work. I mean, we were busy trying to get the police to allow ambulances into certain places and getting people out of jail. Well, the march ended, and I was driven to the airport by Viola Liuzzo, a friendly young volunteer. Next morning, I'm watching TV, and I see her face there. Sometime after dropping me off, she had been shot and killed by a Klansman. I stood there frozen in front of the TV. I thought of this young mother of 5 from Detroit. She had driven by herself for 3 days through 5 states to get to Selma. Viola had just wanted to come help. The following day, I went into the office and I wrote up a complete report of my time in Alabama. I had to do something while everything was still fresh, to leave a historical record, feeling that perhaps some years in the future, someone might want to know about this chapter in our history.
Hello to everybody at AJC. My name is Marvelous Harrison, and I worked for AJC for 29 years. I'm just glad that I decided to change my job. I was working at B. Ortman's, and I found out AJC had an opening, and I was told if I would go to the Federation Employment Agency, I probably would get hired. And when I went there, they hired me. So I left B. Ortman's for about $3 difference in the pay so that I could go to AJC. And I'm very grateful that I did go there because they really treated me very well. First, they made me a secretary, and then I got to be the New York chapter office manager. Thanks to AJC, I was able to go to the march in Montgomery where Martin Luther King spoke. I'm very glad I made the move because I don't think I would have done as well at B. Ortman's as I did at AJC.